The soft click of the elevator echoed in the quiet hallway as I stepped onto the 5th floor of SummitEdge Logistics. It was 6:45 in the morning, and the Boise skyline outside was just beginning to glow with the first brushstrokes of dawn. I arrived early to catch up after 3 days of bereavement leave, 3 days to bury my father. As I placed my coffee on the desk, the screen of my work laptop lit up with a notification. One new email. The subject line read, "Termination notice." I froze. Heart pounding, I clicked. "Clear your desk by the end of the day. Human Resources will handle your exit paperwork." I read it again, then again. The words blurred, unreal. The message continued. "We need employees who prioritize the company during critical operational periods. Your absence has been noted as a failure to demonstrate such commitment." My fingers trembled. That absence had been approved by my direct supervisor. I had buried my father 3 days ago. My name is Elena Moore. I was the regional lead of the most successful division in this company. And that email, sent with no warning, no meeting, no courtesy, just ended 5 years of loyalty, leadership, and relentless effort. I glanced around my desk at the framed picture of my team from the last company retreat at the cactus plant they gave me last Christmas. 5 years, reduced to one email. I took out my phone and snapped a picture of the email, then forwarded it to my personal address. After closing the laptop slowly, I began packing my things into a cardboard box. No one else had arrived yet, so the only sound in the office was the rustling of newspaper as I wrapped my cactus, the same one I kept alive through all-nighters and deadlines. By the time Sophie from accounting walked in at 8:10, my desk was half empty. She paused, frowning. "Elena, what's going on?" "I've been let go," I replied quietly. Her face shifted from confusion to disbelief. "What? You just came back. For your dad's funeral." I nodded. Apparently, that was considered poor prioritization. Sophie shook her head, visibly angry. "This isn't right. Have you told Paula?" "No," I said calmly, "and I will not fight it. But I will not forget it either." By 8:30, more of my team arrived. Liam, Marcus, Jenna. One by one, they stopped as they saw my box. No one said a word at first. The silence was heavy, filled with unspoken rage. Then Natalie came in. Her eyes fell on my empty desk. She dropped her bag and ran over. "You're leaving? What happened?" "They fired me," I said. "Through email." Her lips trembled. "You led the Henderson transition. You saved the Wilson account last quarter. This has to be a mistake." "It's done," I said, closing the box. Travis made the call. By 9, all 7 members of my core team had gathered around me. They stood close, not speaking, their presence louder than any protest. Then he arrived. Travis Keene, my direct supervisor. The man who approved my bereavement leave. The man who now crossed his arms and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "I need everyone back at their desks." No one moved. "Now," he repeated. Still nothing. He stepped closer to me. "You should have waited until the end of the day. This could have been handled discreetly." I looked him in the eye. "Like the discretion you showed by firing me over email after I buried my father?" His expression twitched. "The company needs people who understand when priorities shift." "Say one more word about my father, and you'll regret it," I said, voice low and firm. He hesitated, then said, "Human Resources is expecting you." I picked up the box. "Do not worry. I won't make a scene. But remember this moment. You might need to explain it someday." The Human Resources office was cold and clinical, the walls too white, the air too still. Claire Robbins, the newly hired HR manager, met me with a sympathetic expression. She slid the termination documents across the table. "I'm sorry, Elena." And, "I'm very sorry for your loss." I nodded, glancing over the paperwork. 2 weeks severance. A non-disparagement clause. A reminder of my non-compete agreement. 6 months, no competitors within 300 miles. "This seems sudden," Claire said softly. I pulled out my phone and showed her the email. Her eyes widened. "You were approved for bereavement leave?" "Yes. Last week. By the same man who signed this termination." She scribbled a note, then stood. "Let me verify this with legal. I'll be right back." As she left the room, I stood at the window. I could see the Boise River winding through the city. My father had taken me there to fish when I was little. The river moves, he used to say, but the rocks stay steady. Be like the rocks. When Claire returned, her face said everything. Nothing would change. Unfortunately, we're an at-will state, she began. The company— I know, I interrupted. The company can do what it wants. And so can I. She lowered her voice. Off the record, this isn't right. If you want to pursue— I don't. Thank you. I left the building quietly, box in arms. Outside, the sun had risen. My phone buzzed. A text from Liam. Then another from Natalie. Then Marcus. They were outraged. Furious. Ready to walk out. But I told them to wait. Because I had a plan. The river was already moving. And I would be the rock. I drove home without music, without a single thought louder than the silence inside me. The box sat on the passenger seat, leaning slightly as if even it had grown tired. The streets of Boise were calm, but in my chest, something burned. Not rage, not even sadness, just a slow, steady heat of knowing I was done being overlooked, done being useful until I was inconvenient. When I pulled into my apartment complex, I sat in the car for a while, staring at the cracked pavement, at the kids playing 2 lots over, at nothing in particular. And then my phone buzzed. It was a name I hadn't seen in almost a year. Dominic Chase. Last spring, Dominic had spoken on stage at the Idaho Supply Chain Summit. CEO of Vertex Freight, the youngest executive in the room by at least 15 years. He spoke about innovation, loyalty, and the future of leadership with a confidence that was dangerous. Afterward, we chatted briefly. He told me then, "If you ever need a seat at a table that respects you, call me." I hadn't needed it then. I thought SummitEdge respected me. I thought Travis Keene valued my work. I thought wrong. Now his message read, "Heard what happened. Let's talk." No question mark. No pity. Just a seat at the table, offered again. But I didn't reply right away. I needed space to think, to breathe. I spent the next day walking along the Boise River Greenbelt, tracing the same path I used to walk with my father. The trees were just beginning to change, gold brushing their edges. I sat on a bench by the water and watched the current move. My father's words came back again. The river changes direction with force, but the rocks, you never see them move. They outlast everything. That night, I wrote down 3 things. 1, what do I still want? 2, who do I still trust? 3, where do I go from here? By morning, I had answers. I didn't want revenge. I wanted purpose. I didn't want pity. I wanted clarity. And I wasn't going to grovel for the scraps of a company that had used me until I became inconvenient. I called Dominic. "Miss Moore," he answered on the first ring. "I was hoping you'd call." "I'm ready to talk," I said. "Good. Because I'm ready to make you an offer." We met 2 days later in a quiet corner of a cafe near the river. He arrived early, sleeves rolled up, notebook already open. "I read the headlines," he said. "Saw the internal posts. I know how they let you go. The kind of company that punishes people for grief doesn't deserve good leadership." I didn't respond to the compliment. I only asked, "What do you want from me?" He smiled. "A clean slate. My Boise team is underperforming. They're not broken, they're just misled. I want you to lead them. Rebuild the structure. Reinvent the process. You choose your team, your structure, your rhythm. And the catch." "No catch," he said. "But I'm not hiring a victim. I'm hiring a builder. So if you're here to get back at SummitEdge, walk away now." I leaned forward. I didn't come here to look backward. I came here because I know what I can build if no one's holding me back. His eyes lit up. "Then let's begin." Over the next week, I signed contracts, met with his regional heads, and quietly reached out to people I trusted. Liam, Natalie, Marcus. I did not ask them to leave their jobs. I told them what I was building. I told them why. Each one replied the same way. "When do we start?" We didn't announce anything. No LinkedIn posts. No grand declarations. Because the best revenge is not loud. It is precise. It is patient. It is silent until it is unmissable. And that silence, finally, was mine to control. 3 weeks passed before the first domino fell. I was sitting in my new office, small, sunlit, filled with charts and outlines I had drawn on the glass walls, when I got the message from Liam. Just handed him my notice. It started. I leaned back, letting the satisfaction roll through me in silence. The wave came slowly, almost politely. Marcus left a day later, then Natalie. Within 10 days, 4 more middle managers followed. Each of them left with quiet professionalism. No trash talk. No explanations. Just clean, silent exits. And it shook Summit Access to its core. Travis sent out an internal memo titled, Team Loyalty and Organizational Change, filled with words like transition and adaptability. But I knew the truth. The engine he built had cracks, and every person walking away from that building was one less gear turning in his machine. Meanwhile, at Vertex, we were already in motion. I created a flexible project structure, modeled around efficiency and balance. No 20-hour weeks disguised as dedication. No trauma masked as loyalty. We worked smarter, not louder. And then came the patent meeting. It started with a routine legal call. Dominic's in-house counsel needed clarity on supply chain mapping systems, specifically, some predictive routing models. As I read through the documents, something stopped me cold. There it was. My original code. Not a duplicate. Not a variation. The code I had written 3 years ago. Word for word. Line for line. It had been filed through Summit Access Tech Lab under the name of an engineer who joined 6 months after me. I sat frozen for a full minute. The betrayal wasn't just emotional. It was intellectual theft. They had used my grief, my absence, to scrub my name from the things I built. I forwarded the file to Dominic with a single line. This belongs to me. 10 minutes later, he was on the phone. We'll pursue it, he said. Carefully. Quietly. But I need to know, are you ready to make this public if it comes to it? I didn't hesitate. Yes. Because this was no longer about dignity. It was about identity. About not letting someone else rewrite your story just because they have the power to silence you. A week later, Vertex filed a patent request under my name, one I had written and documented before my mother's passing, complete with timestamps, draft logs, and prototype flows. Summit Access had nothing to stand on. But they tried. Oh, they tried. They sent a cease and desist letter to Vertex, claiming IP overlap. Then they sent a second letter, this time directly to me, implying breach of contract. Dominic handled both with elegance. His legal team prepared for this level of corporate pettiness. And then, the moment arrived. A press outlet published a story under the headline, Innovator behind Summit Access's predictive system speaks out after silent exit. My face wasn't on it, but my code was. My name. My timeline. My truth. By the next day, my inbox exploded. One message stood out. It was from the assistant of Travis Keene. Mr. Keene would like to schedule a private call. I stared at it for a full minute, then typed, No thank you. And then I deleted the message. The call I declined wasn't the last attempt. A week later, I was summoned, to an industry roundtable at Skybridge Conference Center. The email was polite, almost deferential. I had been selected as a key innovator in the tech logistics sector, and the event would be a networking showcase hosted by the Global Supply Chain Association. I knew exactly who would be there. Travis. And I was done running. Dominic supported the move. You don't have to engage directly, he said. Just show up. Be present. Let them see who they tried to erase. I arrived early, dressed in graphite gray and confidence. The conference hall buzzed with soft music and champagne chatter. I shook hands, answered questions, deflected praise with grace. My name was finally being spoken in rooms I had once only entered as a supporting act. And then I saw him. Travis Keene stood at the far end of the hall, talking to a group of executives near the tall windows. He hadn't aged a day, but I had. Not in wrinkles, but in resilience. In posture. In clarity. He noticed me and froze mid-sentence. I didn't blink. I smiled instead. An hour later, I was on stage for the innovation panel. The moderator asked about the rise of agile systems and what had driven my approach. I suppose it started with a mistake. I said into the mic. I once believed that if you just worked hard enough, long enough, people would see you. They'd value you. But visibility isn't earned through effort. It's claimed. And the systems we build, whether in tech or in life, need transparency, ownership, and fairness to thrive. The audience was silent, then erupted into applause. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Travis leave the room. When the panel ended, a woman approached me with an envelope. She introduced herself as a legal liaison. Inside the envelope was a settlement offer from SummitEdge. Confidential, of course. Financial compensation for the unauthorized use of my systems. A figure printed in bold, followed by a stack of terms meant to silence me forever. I read it, folded it back, and handed it to her. Tell them to try again, with a public apology. The look on her face was priceless. That evening, I returned home not with a contract, but with clarity. I had reached a place where fear no longer dictated my choices. Not fear of retaliation. Not fear of exclusion. Not even fear of being alone. Because I wasn't. I had a team that believed in me. A company that bore my fingerprint. And most importantly, I had reclaimed my own voice. One that would never be buried again, not in code, not in contracts, not in silence. By the end of autumn, Polaris Flow had done what most industry analysts called impossible. We scaled into 3 new regions, launched an adaptive logistics tool powered by predictive AI, and secured 2 international patents, one of them the original architecture I had hidden in plain sight for years. The funny thing about building something powerful is that the code always carries a fingerprint. Lines of logic, decision trees, priority weights. They were more than formulas. They were echoes of my late nights, of coffee-fueled clarity, of the quiet defiance that shaped each module when no one believed I could lead. And now, the world was reading my voice, whether they knew it or not. We were shortlisted for the Global Innovation Prize. I was invited to speak in Toronto, Paris, then Singapore. But before any flight could take off, something unexpected happened. Polaris Flow was approached for acquisition. A Tier 1 tech conglomerate, Nexus, extended an 8-figure offer, along with full autonomy and a guaranteed leadership board seat for me. It was validation on a scale I had never imagined. Dominic's voice cracked a little when he read the numbers out loud. But I hesitated, not because I didn't believe in the offer, but because it forced me to ask the question I had buried under metrics and milestones. What did I want now? My revenge had long since transformed into something quieter, deeper. I no longer wanted to crush Travis or see SummitEdge burn. They were already fossils, fading. I didn't even need the apology anymore. But I did want something. I wanted a place where no woman, no underdog, no overlooked builder would ever again be told they weren't enough. A place where silence wasn't the price of belonging. I took the meeting with Nexus in a glass tower in Chicago. Their chief executive, Maya Wren, greeted me with an energy I recognized instantly. The sharp calm of someone who had also been underestimated once. Her first question wasn't about profits. Who do you build for, Elena? I answered without pause. For the ones who stayed late and got left behind. For the ones who designed the whole machine but were never listed in the credits. For the ones who learned to lead in shadows and finally stepped into the light. She nodded. Then let's make sure they never get buried again. 3 weeks later, the deal closed. Polaris Flow became a flagship division of Nexus, retaining its name, its structure, and its culture. My team received retention bonuses, expanded benefits, and seats on new internal councils. And I received not just a title, but a platform. I was no longer the woman they pushed out. I was the architect of what replaced them. Spring returned to the city with subtle grace, blooms breaking through gray pavements, the river thawing with the quiet rhythm of time moving on. I stood by the window of my new office, an entire floor now, not just a corner, and watched as the skyline blinked to life beneath an early dusk. My name, Elena Ross, now appeared in press releases alongside industry pioneers. But I didn't feel like a pioneer. I felt like a survivor who had turned her wound into a weapon, then forged that weapon into a bridge for others. The letters started coming after our acquisition was announced. Not emails. Real letters. Handwritten. From interns, junior engineers, even project managers in cities I had never visited. They wrote about moments they almost quit. About ideas dismissed in rooms that smelled like glass ceilings. About the first time they read Polaris Flow's white paper and realized someone like them had made it to the top. That was the legacy I hadn't planned for. One morning, I received a letter without a return address. Inside was a short note, typed, clicked to an old photograph. It was a picture from 6 years ago. A Summit Access team offsite. My old group, smiling under forced enthusiasm. I was in the far corner, laptop open, head bowed. Forgotten, even in documentation. The note read, "I watched what they did to you. I stayed silent. I'm sorry, but I see what you've built, and I'm trying to do better. Thank you." No name. Just initials. TM. I didn't need a full name to recognize the weight behind the message. Some ghosts don't come back for vengeance. They return to seek forgiveness. And I gave it. Because the truth is, forgiveness is not about them. It's about freeing yourself from the grip of what broke you. Months passed. Travis Ellington resigned from Summit Access shortly after the company posted its worst fiscal quarter in a decade. Industry blogs speculated internal audits, leadership fallout, even lawsuits. I didn't care to read further. It wasn't my storm anymore. I was building somewhere else. And I was never alone in it. One Friday, I visited a high school STEM program sponsored by Nexus. I had donated a portion of my equity windfall to launch it, quietly, under a foundation named after my father. The students didn't know who I was until the facilitator introduced me. A girl with wide eyes and dark curls raised her hand. "Miss Ross," she said shyly, "how did you get brave enough to do all this?" The room waited. I walked over and sat beside her eye level. I didn't need a stage. I didn't start brave, I said. I started angry. But I chose to turn that anger into fuel instead of fire. And every time someone told me to stay small, I wrote bigger code. When they pushed me out, I built my own door. She smiled. "I want to do that too." "You will," I said softly. "But don't wait for someone to give you permission." As the session ended, I returned to my car, the photo from the letter still tucked in my briefcase, the letter stacked in a drawer I opened whenever doubt whispered again. My journey hadn't been about revenge. Not really. It had been about reclaiming the pen, writing the next chapter on my own terms, and leaving the line open for others to write theirs. The wind was soft that morning, brushing against the fabric of my blazer as I stood on the rooftop terrace of the Nexus headquarters. Below, the city stirred like a living canvas, honking horns, pulsing neon, ambition layered over asphalt. It had been 1 year since the launch, and everything had changed. But I had changed more. Inside, the team prepared for our annual innovation showcase. Engineers, buzzed about like excited bees, each presenting projects I could never have imagined alone. Autonomous medical drones, AI-enhanced disaster response networks, even a beta version of our collaborative satellite coding framework. They didn't look to me for permission anymore. They looked to each other. That was the legacy I wanted. Not a throne, but a garden. I walked through the open-plan workspace, smiling at new faces, nodding at old ones. My assistant handed me a tablet showing a list of partners and media outlets attending today. Near the bottom was a surprising entry. Summit Access, represented by a junior analyst. The irony didn't sting, it felt poetic. The company that once erased me was now studying the blueprint I'd drawn in my absence. My phone buzzed. A video message from Clara, the teenage girl I'd met at the school months earlier. She had won a national coding competition using one of our open-source platforms. "Miss Ross," she beamed, "you said I didn't need permission. You were right. They tried to tell me robotics wasn't for girls, so I built my own robot and won. Thank you for seeing me." I watched it twice. Then I sent her a congratulatory message with an offer, a summer internship at Nexus. Sometimes, the greatest revolution begins with someone simply refusing to be small. Later that day, I stepped on stage for the showcase. The applause was warm, not thunderous, but real. In my keynote, I did not talk about revenge or the past. I spoke of ecosystems, inclusivity, and resilience. I told the story of a company built not on domination, but on empathy and vision. "Legacy," I said, "is not what you leave behind when you're gone. It's what grows when you decide to plant roots where no one expected a garden." As the sun dipped behind the skyline, casting golden light through the glass walls, I stood quietly in the corner, watching the next generation present ideas I never would have dreamed of. No one asked where I had come from. They only cared where we were all going. That was the quiet crown I wore now. Not one of dominance, but of dignity. Not forged in gold, but in grit. not raised above others, but shared with them. And as the city lights flickered on, I whispered a silent promise to the girl I once was, the one who stood outside that glass door in the rain. We made it, and we made room.